The clock on the clinic wall showed 11:30 when Rosa finally locked the medicine cabinet for the night. Her white coat was stained with the day's work, a mix of iodine, children's tears, and hope. The small medical facility where she worked had seen better days, but it was still standing, which was more than could be said for half the buildings in their neighborhood. Outside, the streets were unusually quiet. Even the stray dogs that usually roamed the alleys seemed to have found somewhere safer to spend the night. Rosa pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and started the familiar walk home. She had been making the same journey for 3 years now, ever since she finished her medical training and decided to stay in the community where she grew up. Her mother had begged her to leave, to find work in the peaceful cities far from here. Why stay in a place where people forget how to smile? Her mother would ask. But Rosa couldn't abandon the place that raised her. Someone had to stay. Someone had to help the children who got sick, the elderly who needed their medicine, the mothers who were bringing new life into an uncertain world. The streetlights flickered as she walked. Most of them had been damaged months ago and never fixed. The city had bigger problems to worry about than broken lights. Rosa knew every crack in the sidewalk, every boarded-up window, every corner where she needed to be extra careful. Tonight felt different though. There was a tension in the air that made her skin crawl. She quickened her pace, her medical bag bumping against her hip with each step. Inside were the basic supplies she always carried: bandages, pain relievers, a small bottle of clean water. Not much, but enough to help someone in need. That's how her grandmother had raised her. Always carry something that can help another person. The old woman used to say, "You never know when you might be someone's only hope." The sound of her footsteps echoed off the empty buildings. Most families were already inside, doors locked, curtains drawn. They had learned to make themselves invisible when darkness fell. Rosa understood their fear, but she also knew that hiding wasn't always an option. Someone had to move through this world, had to keep the connections alive between people who had forgotten how to trust. As she turned into the narrow alley that would cut 10 minutes off her walk home, Rosa heard something that made her freeze. It was quiet crying, the kind that comes from someone who has been holding back tears for too long. She stopped and listened. The sound was coming from behind a pile of old construction materials that had been sitting there for months. Her medical training kicked in. Someone was hurt, scared, or both. Every instinct told her to keep walking, to get home safely, but her heart wouldn't let her leave. She set down her bag and called out softly, "Hello? Is someone there? I'm a nurse. I can help." The crying stopped immediately. Rosa could hear movement, like someone trying to scramble away, but not quite able to manage it. She took a careful step forward, her hands visible and empty. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help." That's when she saw him. He couldn't have been more than 19, maybe 20 at most. His uniform was torn and dirty, hanging loose on his thin frame. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were the eyes of someone much older, someone who had seen things that no young person should ever have to witness. In his shaking hands, he held a weapon that looked too heavy for him to carry. Rosa's heart started beating faster, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had dealt with scared people before. People who were hurting and didn't know who to trust. This boy, because that's what he was, despite the uniform, was no different. He was just more scared than most. "Hey," she said gently, the way she would talk to a frightened child at the clinic. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." She could see now that he was injured. Dark stains covered his jacket, and the way he was holding his left side told her everything she needed to know. He was losing blood, probably had been for a while. The boy raised the weapon with trembling hands, but Rosa could see he didn't really want to use it. His finger wasn't even on the trigger properly. He was holding it like someone who had never wanted to touch such a thing, but had been forced to learn. "Please," he whispered, and his voice cracked like he hadn't used it in days. "Please don't come any closer." Rosa slowly raised her hands, showing him she meant no harm. "What's your name?" she asked softly. He blinked hard, like he was trying to remember. "Diego," he finally said. "My name is Diego. Diego, I'm Rosa. I work at the medical clinic just a few blocks from here. I can see that you're hurt. Will you let me help you?" "Diego," shook his head quickly. I can't trust anyone. They said terrible things would happen if I trust the wrong people. Rosa felt her heart break a little. This boy had been through something that had shattered his ability to believe in kindness. She had seen it before in the children who came to the clinic, the ones who flinched when adults reached out to help them. I understand, she said quietly. Sometimes it's hard to know who the good people are, but right now, you're bleeding, and if we don't stop it, you could get very sick. I don't need you to trust me completely. I just need you to let me help stop the bleeding. Diego's eyes darted back and forth, like he was looking for an escape route. But Rosa could see he was getting weaker. The blood loss was starting to affect him. His face was pale, and the hand holding the weapon was shaking more now. Where are you from, Diego? She asked, trying to keep him talking, keep him conscious. Far from here, he said. I was trying to get home. I just want to go home. Rosa nodded. Everyone deserves to go home. Everyone deserves to be safe. But first, we need to take care of that wound. Can you tell me how you got hurt? Diego looked down at his side, seeming surprised to see the blood there. I don't remember exactly. Everything happened so fast. There was noise and people running, and then pain. He looked back up at her. Are you really a nurse? I am. I help people every day. Mothers with new babies, children with fevers, elderly people who need their medicine. That's all I do. I help people get better. For a moment, something in Diego's expression softened. Maybe he was remembering his own mother, or a grandmother who had taken care of him when he was small. My grandmother was sick before I left home, he said quietly. She had this cough that wouldn't go away. What was her name? Rosa asked. Esperanza. It means hope. Rosa smiled gently. That's a beautiful name. I bet she would want you to get help when you need it. I bet she would want you to come home healthy and safe. Diego's grip on the weapon loosened slightly. Rosa could see him fighting with himself, trying to decide whether to trust her or run. But his body was making the decision for him. He was losing too much blood to run much further. If I let you help, he said slowly, you won't call anyone? You won't tell them where I am? Rosa looked into his young, frightened eyes and made a promise she hoped she could keep. I won't call anyone. Right now, you're just a hurt person who needs help. That's all. But even as she spoke these words of comfort, Rosa noticed something that made her stomach drop. There was already blood on her white coat. Not Diego's blood, her own. Rosa looked down at the growing red stain on her white coat with a strange sense of calm. Her medical training had taught her to assess injuries quickly, and she could tell this wasn't immediately life-threatening, but it was serious enough to make her dizzy if she didn't address it soon. Diego noticed her looking down, and his eyes widened with horror. No, oh no, he whispered, dropping the weapon completely. It clattered against the concrete, the sound echoing through the empty alley. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to. Rosa pressed her hand against the wound, feeling the warm wetness seep through her fingers. The bullet had caught her in the side when Diego had first panicked upon seeing her. In all the talking and trying to calm him down, the adrenaline had kept her from fully registering the pain. Now, it was starting to hit her. It's okay, she said, though her voice came out weaker than she intended. Accidents happen when people are scared. Diego scrambled closer, his own injury forgotten. Tears were streaming down his face now, mixing with the dirt and exhaustion. I killed you. I killed the only person who tried to help me. You didn't kill me, Rosa said firmly, though she had to lean against the brick wall for support. But I'm going to need you to help me now. Can you do that? The young man nodded frantically, wiping his nose with his sleeve. Tell me what to do. Please, tell me what to do. Rosa looked at this boy who moments ago had been pointing a weapon at her, and now was desperate to save her life. It struck her how quickly fear could turn to care, how thin the line was between enemy and friend. First, I need you to help me sit down properly. Then we're going to work together to stop this bleeding. Diego carefully helped her slide down the wall until she was sitting on the ground. His movements were gentle, like he was handling something precious. Rosa could see his own wound was still bleeding, but he seemed to have forgotten about it entirely. In my medical bag, Rosa said, pointing to where she had dropped it earlier. There's a roll of white bandages and a small bottle of clear liquid. Can you get those for me? Diego crawled over to the bag and brought back the supplies. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold them. I don't know how to do this, he said. What if I make it worse? Rosa managed a small smile. You can't make it much worse than it already is. Besides, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. I've taught lots of people basic first aid. You just have to listen carefully and trust yourself. She guided him through cleaning the wound and applying pressure with the bandages. As he worked, Rosa kept talking to keep both of them calm. Tell me about your grandmother, Esperanza. What was she like? Diego's face softened as he spoke. She was the strongest person I ever knew. When my parents died in the earthquake 5 years ago, she took me in without hesitation. She worked 3 jobs to make sure I could go to school. His voice cracked. She always said I was going to be a teacher someday. She said I had gentle hands and a patient heart. She sounds like a wise woman, Rosa said, wincing as Diego tightened the bandage. A little tighter. That's good. What happened? How did you end up here, so far from home? Diego was quiet for a long moment, focusing on wrapping the bandage properly. Finally, he spoke. Men came to our village. They said all the young people had to come with them, to help protect our families. They said if we didn't come willingly, they would make things very difficult for everyone we loved. Rosa felt her heart sink. She had heard stories like this before. Young people taken from their families, forced into situations no one should have to face. How long ago was this? 8 months, Diego said quietly. I tried to escape twice, but they always found me. The last time, they said if I tried again, they would go back and hurt my grandmother. He looked up at Rosa with eyes full of pain. So I stopped trying. I just did what they told me to do and tried to survive. What changed? Rosa asked gently. What made you run this time? Diego finished with the bandage and sat back on his heels. 3 days ago, we were told to do something I couldn't do. Something that would have hurt innocent people, families with children. He shook his head. I couldn't be that person. I couldn't become someone my grandmother would be ashamed of. Rosa reached out and touched his arm. So you ran. I ran. And? They shot me as I was climbing over a fence. But I kept running anyway. I've been walking for 3 days, trying to get far enough away that they won't come looking for me. Diego looked around the dark alley. I was hiding here, trying to figure out what to do next, when you appeared. And you got scared and the gun went off. Rosa finished for him. Diego nodded miserably. I've never wanted to hurt anyone. Even during these 8 months, I tried to find ways to avoid actually hurting people. But tonight, I was so tired and scared, and when I saw someone coming, I just panicked. Rosa studied his young face in the dim light. Despite everything he had been through, despite the weapon he had been carrying, she could see the gentle person his grandmother had described. The scared boy who just wanted to go home. Diego, she said softly. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. He looked at her with worried eyes. What is it? Rosa took a deep breath. The words she was about to say would sound crazy, desperate even. But looking at this young man who was so broken by the violence he had been forced into, who was crying because he had accidentally hurt someone who tried to help him, she knew she had to try something different. I know this will sound strange, but I want to make you an offer. A way for both of us to have hope for the future. Diego frowned, confused. What kind of offer? Rosa looked directly into his eyes. In my culture, when someone saves your life, there's a bond created between you. You saved my life tonight by helping stop the bleeding. And maybe, in some small way, I helped save yours too, by showing you that not everyone in this world wants to hurt you. I don't understand, Diego said. Rosa's voice grew stronger, more sure. I'm 28 years old. I've spent my whole adult life helping people, bringing children into this world, taking care of families. But I've never had a family of my own because I've been so focused on taking care of everyone else. Diego was listening intently now, though he still looked confused. What I'm saying is this, Rosa continued. If we both survive tonight, if we both make it through whatever comes next, Maybe we could think about building something good together, something that would honor both your grandmother's memory and my dream of having a family to protect and love." Diego's eyes widened as he began to understand what she was saying. "You mean that sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, two people can choose to create hope together? We could give this world strong, kind children who would grow up knowing that love is more powerful than fear. Children who would make your grandmother proud." Diego stared at her for a long moment, tears still flowing down his face. But now, they seemed different somehow. Not just tears of fear and regret, but something else. Something that looked almost like relief. "You would do that?" he whispered. "Even after what I did to you?" Rosa smiled, despite the pain in her side. "Especially because of what happened tonight. Because I've seen who you really are when everything is stripped away, and I think your grandmother would approve." Diego sat in stunned silence, trying to process what Rosa had just offered him. In the span of one night, he had gone from being a terrified young man running for his life to someone being offered a chance at a real future. It felt too good to be true, like something that happened in the stories his grandmother used to tell him when he was small. "I don't deserve this," he whispered finally. "I don't deserve kindness from you. Not after what I did." Rosa shifted slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position against the wall. The bleeding had slowed thanks to Diego's careful bandaging, but she was still losing strength. "Do you know what I learned in my years working at the clinic?" she asked softly. Diego shook his head. "I learned that deserving has nothing to do with healing. I've treated people who made terrible choices, people who hurt others, people who seemed beyond saving. But when someone is bleeding in front of me, I don't ask if they deserve help. I just help them." She looked at Diego's young face, still streaked with tears and dirt. "Tonight, we're both bleeding. We're both scared. We're both trying to figure out how to survive. That makes us the same, not different." Diego wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "But I was carrying a weapon. I was part of something that hurt people." "Were you?" Rosa asked gently. "Or were you a prisoner who was forced to carry a weapon?" "There's a difference, Diego. The person who threatened your grandmother and forced you to leave your home, that person made the choice to do evil. You made the choice to run away rather than hurt innocent people. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are." A small sound escaped Diego's throat, something between a sob and a laugh. "My grandmother always said I was too soft-hearted to be a soldier. She used to worry that I cared too much about other people's feelings. And now, you're sitting in an alley, crying because you accidentally hurt someone who tried to help you." Rosa pointed out. "I'd say your grandmother was right about your soft heart." Diego looked down at his hands. The same hands that had been shaking when he held the weapon. The same hands that had just carefully bandaged Rosa's wound. "When I was little, I used to rescue injured birds and bring them to my grandmother. She would help me make little nests for them and feed them until they were strong enough to fly away." "What happened to the birds?" Rosa asked. "Most of them got better. They flew away and built their own nests, had their own families." Diego's voice grew quieter. "My grandmother always said that was the best part. Not just saving them, but watching them go on to create new life." Rosa felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the injury. "Maybe that's what we could do too. Maybe we could both heal from what happened to us, and then create something beautiful together." Diego looked up at her with wonder in his eyes. "You really mean it, don't you? You're not just saying this because you're hurt and scared." "I'm saying it because I'm hurt and scared," Rosa corrected him. "But also because sometimes, in the darkest moments, we see things more clearly than we ever have before. Tonight, I've seen your heart, Diego. I've seen how you care for others even when you're afraid. I've seen how you refuse to become the kind of person who hurts innocent people, even when it costs you everything." She paused, gathering her strength. "And you've seen mine. You've seen that I'm willing to trust someone who could have hurt me, that I believe in the possibility of healing and hope, even when everything seems broken." Diego moved closer to her, careful not to disturb her bandages. "Tell me about the children you've helped bring into the world. What are they like?" Rosa's face lit up despite her pain. "Oh, Diego, they're amazing. There's little Anna, who was Born during a thunderstorm last spring, she came into the world with her eyes wide open, like she was ready to take on anything. And Pablo, who was so tiny when he was born that we weren't sure he would make it, but he fought so hard, and now he's the strongest 6-month-old I've ever seen. Do their parents bring them to visit you? Diego asked. Sometimes. Anna's mother brings her by the clinic when she's in the neighborhood. Anna always reaches for my stethoscope and tries to eat it. Rosa laughed softly. And Pablo's father stops by to show me how much Pablo has grown. He's so proud. He can barely contain himself. Diego smiled for the first time since Rosa had met him. They're lucky to have you as part of their story, and I'm lucky to be part of theirs, Rosa said. That's what I'm trying to tell you, Diego. We could be part of each other's story, not because we have to be, but because we choose to be. The young man was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he said, "What would your family think? About me, I mean. About someone like me being part of your life." Rosa considered this. My mother would probably worry at first. She worries about everything. But once she met you, once she saw how gentle you are, how much you care about doing the right thing, she would love you. She always said she wanted me to find someone with a good heart. And your father? My father died when I was 15, Rosa said quietly. But I know what he would have said. He always told me that the measure of a person isn't where they come from or what's happened to them. It's what they choose to do when they have the power to choose. Diego nodded slowly. Tonight, when I could have chosen to run away and leave you bleeding, I chose to help you instead. And when I could have chosen to call for help and have you arrested, I chose to trust you instead, Rosa added. We both chose kindness, Diego said, understanding beginning to dawn in his voice. We did. And maybe that's how it starts. Maybe building a life together starts with two people choosing to be kind to each other, even when the world around them isn't kind. Diego looked around the dark alley where they sat, at the broken streetlights and boarded windows, at the signs of a community that had seen too much hardship. This isn't a very romantic place for someone to propose building a life together, he said with a small smile. Rosa laughed, and the sound was like music in the darkness. I don't know about that. This is the place where we chose to save each other instead of destroying each other. This is the place where we decided that hope was stronger than fear. That seems pretty romantic to me. Diego reached out and carefully took her hand. His palm was rough and calloused, but his touch was incredibly gentle. If we do this, if we really try to build something together, I want to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me. You already are, Rosa said firmly. But I understand wanting to become even better. I want that too. I want to become the kind of person who deserves the love and loyalty you showed your grandmother. We could help each other become better, Diego suggested. We could remind each other every day that we're more than the worst things that have happened to us. Rosa squeezed his hand as much as her weakening grip would allow. We could give each other permission to heal, and then we could create something beautiful for the world, Diego added. Children who would grow up knowing that love is possible, even after loss. Children who would carry both our stories forward. Strong children, Rosa whispered, echoing the words she had spoken earlier. Children who would make your grandmother, Esperanza, proud. Diego brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Then yes, he said quietly, if we both survive this night, if we both find our way to tomorrow, then yes, let's build something beautiful together. The sound of sirens in the distance broke through their quiet moment. Diego's head snapped up, his body tensing with fear. For a second, Rosa saw the terrified young man return, the one who had been running for 3 days straight. They found me, he whispered, starting to pull away from her. I have to go. I have to run. Rosa held onto his hand with what little strength she had left. Wait, listen to me. Those sirens aren't coming for you. Diego's eyes darted toward the mouth of the alley. How do you know? Because I know this neighborhood. I know the sounds. That's an ambulance, not police cars. Someone else needs help tonight. Rosa's voice was getting weaker, but her grip on his hand remained firm. Besides, even if they were looking for you, running now would mean leaving me here to bleed. Is that the choice you want to make? The question hit Diego like a physical blow. He looked down at Rosa, seeing how pale she had become, how her breathing had grown more shallow. No, no, can't leave you like this. But what if they do find me? What if helping you gets you in trouble too? Rosa managed a weak smile. Then we'll face that together. But right now, the only thing that matters is making sure we both survive the next few hours. Diego nodded and settled back down beside her. The sirens were getting closer, but they seemed to be heading toward a different part of the neighborhood. Tell me what I need to do to help you, he said quietly. First, check your own wound. You've been so focused on taking care of me that you've ignored your own injury. Rosa watched as Diego lifted his torn shirt to examine the bullet wound in his side. It was still bleeding, though not as heavily as before. It's not too bad, he said, though Rosa could see he was trying to downplay the pain. Use some of those bandages on yourself. I can't take care of you if I'm unconscious, and you can't take care of me if you pass out from blood loss. Rosa's medical training was kicking in even through her exhaustion. We need to take care of each other. As Diego worked on his own wound, Rosa kept talking. She had learned that keeping patients conscious and engaged was sometimes the difference between life and death. Tell me about your home. What was it like before you had to leave? Diego's face softened as he wrapped the bandage around his torso. It was a small village in the mountains, very green, with lots of trees and a river that ran right through the center of town. My grandmother had a little house with a garden where she grew tomatoes and herbs. It sounds beautiful, Rosa said. What did you do there? Before everything changed, I was studying to be a teacher, just like my grandmother always said I would be. I was in my second year at the small college in the next town over. Diego's voice grew wistful. I loved working with the younger children. There was something amazing about watching them understand something new, seeing their faces light up when they finally grasped a difficult concept. Rosa felt a warmth in her chest. Despite her injury, you would have been a wonderful teacher. You still could be, you know. When this is all over, do you really think so? After everything that's happened, I think your experiences, as terrible as they've been, would make you an even better teacher. You understand what it's like to be afraid, to feel powerless. You would never dismiss a child's fears or struggles. Rosa paused to catch her breath. And you would teach them that even in the darkest times, there are people who will choose to help rather than hurt. Diego finished with his bandage and moved closer to Rosa. You're getting weaker, aren't you? Rosa nodded honestly. The blood loss is catching up with me, but I'm not giving up. We made a promise to each other tonight, and I intend to keep it. What can I do? Diego asked urgently. There has to be something more I can do. Rosa thought for a moment. In my medical bag, there's a small packet of powder. It's called a clotting agent. It will help stop internal bleeding. Mix it with a little bit of that clean water and help me drink it. Diego found the packet and carefully mixed it as she instructed. As he helped her drink the bitter mixture, Rosa continued talking. While we wait for that to work, tell me about the children you want to have someday. Have you ever thought about it? Diego's hands were gentle as he helped her drink. I used to think about it all the time. Before everything happened, I imagined having a little house like my grandmother's, with children running around the garden. Maybe a dog or two. He paused. I always thought I would name my first son after my father, and my first daughter after my grandmother. Esperanza, Rosa said softly. Hope. That's a beautiful name for a little girl. What about you? What kind of mother do you want to be? Rosa closed her eyes for a moment, picturing the future they had talked about. I want to be the kind of mother who teaches her children that healing is always possible, that no matter how broken something seems, with enough love and patience, it can be made whole again. Like what we're doing right now, Diego said quietly. Exactly like what we're doing right now. Rosa opened her eyes and looked at him. We're two broken people choosing to heal each other. That's what I want to teach our children. That love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice we make every day. Diego reached out and brushed a strand of hair away from Rosa's face. I've never met anyone like you before. Even in the worst moment of my life, you saw something worth saving in me, because there is something worth saving in you. There always has been. Rosa's voice was getting softer, but her conviction remained strong. Your grandmother saw it when she raised you to be gentle and kind. The families in your village saw it when they trusted you to teach their children. And I see it now, in the way you're taking care of me even though you're hurt and scared." The sirens had faded into the distance, leaving them in relative quiet again. Diego looked around the alley, at the makeshift first aid station they had created with Rosa's medical supplies scattered around them. "This isn't how I imagined meeting the person I might spend my life with," he said with a small, sad smile. Rosa laughed weakly. "I don't think anyone imagines meeting their future family in an alley while they're both bleeding. But maybe that's what makes it special. We didn't meet when everything was perfect. We met when everything was broken, and we chose to put the pieces back together. Together," Diego repeated, like he was testing the word. "Together," Rosa confirmed. "No matter what happens next, we're not alone anymore. We're not just two scared people trying to survive. We're partners now. We're a team." Diego squeezed her hand gently. "Promise me something, Rosa." "What?" "Promise me that if something happens to me, if they find me and take me away, you'll still believe that good things are possible, that you'll still help people, still bring children into the world, still choose hope over fear." Rosa looked directly into his eyes. "Only if you promise me the same thing. If something happens to me, if this injury is worse than we think, promise me you'll still believe that you deserve love and kindness, that you'll still try to become the teacher you were meant to be." "I promise," Diego said solemnly. "Then I promise too," Rosa replied. They sat together in the darkness, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, holding onto the hope that tomorrow would bring them the chance to build the life they had dreamed of together. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the small rehabilitation center where Diego sat at a wooden table, carefully writing a letter. His handwriting had improved significantly since he started his studies, and his hands no longer shook when he held a pen. The scared young man who had hidden in an alley was still there, but he was growing stronger every day. The center had become his home after that night. Rosa had kept her promise not to call anyone, but when morning came, and they both needed proper medical care, she had brought him to people she trusted. Dr. Martinez, who ran the rehabilitation program, had seen too many young people like Diego to ask too many questions about the past. Instead, he focused on the future. "Diego," called Elena, one of the counselors, "your medical training instructor is here for your afternoon session." Diego looked up and smiled. 3 months ago, when he had first mentioned wanting to become a paramedic, everyone had been supportive, but cautious. Young people who had been through trauma often had big dreams that were hard to achieve. But Diego had shown up every day, studied every night, and practiced bandagging techniques until his fingers moved with confidence. "I'll be right there," he called back, then returned to his letter. The letter was to Rosa, as all his letters were. She visited when she could, but her work at the clinic kept her busy, especially since she had started a new program teaching basic first aid to community members. Diego understood. They both had work to do before they could build the life they had talked about that night. He wrote carefully, telling her about his progress in his medical studies, about the other young people at the center who were finding their way back to normal life, about the small garden they had started behind the building where they grew tomatoes and herbs. He always ended his letters the same way, with updates about his plans for their future together. Rosa kept every letter in a small wooden box beside her bed. She had read them so many times that she had memorized the parts where Diego wrote about his dreams of working alongside her at the clinic, of the little house they would have someday, of the children who would grow up knowing that love could grow from the most unlikely beginnings. Her own recovery had been slower than she had expected. The bullet wound had healed well, but the emotional impact of that night had taken longer to process. For weeks afterward, she would wake up thinking about Diego, wondering if he was safe, if he was really healing the way he seemed to be in his letters. Dr. Martinez had encouraged their relationship, but also advised them to take time to heal individually before making any major life decisions. "Love that grows from trauma can be very strong," he had told them both. "But it's important to make sure you're choosing each other because you want to, because you need to." That advice had been hard to follow at first. Both Rosa and Diego felt a powerful connection, a sense that they had saved each other in that alley. But as the months passed, their relationship had grown beyond that desperate night. They discovered they genuinely enjoyed each other's company, shared similar values about helping others, and had compatible dreams for the future. Rosa was at the clinic when Diego's latest letter arrived. Mrs. Santos, the elderly woman who helped with filing, brought it to her with a knowing smile. "Another letter from your young man," she said teasingly. Rosa blushed slightly as she took the letter. The entire clinic staff had heard the story of how she and Diego met, though Rosa had never shared all the details. They knew it had been dramatic, and that both of them had been injured, but the specifics of that night remained private between them. She opened the letter eagerly, as she always did. Diego's handwriting had become so familiar that she could almost hear his voice as she read. His words, "My dear Rosa," the letter began. "Today, I successfully treated my first real emergency. A construction worker came to the center with a deep cut on his arm, and I was able to clean the wound, apply proper bandages, and stop the bleeding without supervision. Dr. Martinez said I handled it like someone who had been doing this work for years." Rosa smiled as she read. She could picture Diego working calmly and efficiently, his gentle hands steady as they helped someone in need. It was exactly what she had seen in him that first night. The natural instinct to heal rather than harm. The letter continued with news about his studies and his progress in therapy. Diego wrote openly about the nightmares that still sometimes woke him up, about the days when memories of his 8 months of captivity made it hard to concentrate. But he also wrote about the growing sense of peace he felt, the way each day of normal life helped him remember who he had been before everything went wrong. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said that night," Diego wrote, "about how healing is always possible with enough love and patience. I think you were right. I can feel myself becoming whole again. Not the same person I was before, but someone new. Someone who understands both darkness and light." Rosa felt tears in her eyes as she read these words. She had watched Diego's transformation through his letters and during his visits to the clinic. The frightened boy was growing into a confident young man who genuinely wanted to help others. The final paragraph of the letter made her heart race with excitement. "Rosa, I have something important to ask you, but not in a letter. Dr. Martinez says I'm ready to start working part-time at local medical facilities to gain experience. I requested to be assigned to your clinic, if they'll have me. I want to work beside you, to learn from you, and to start building the partnership we dreamed about. I also want to ask you a question that's been in my heart for months, but I want to ask it in person, in a place where we can both see sunlight instead of shadows." Rosa's hands were shaking as she finished reading. She looked around the clinic where she had worked for so many years, imagining Diego there beside her, the two of them working together to heal their community. It felt right in a way that made her whole body feel warm. 3 days later, Diego walked through the doors of the clinic wearing the crisp white uniform of a medical trainee. Rosa looked up from the patient file she was reviewing, and their eyes met across the room. For a moment, they were both back in that dark alley, two scared people who had chosen to trust each other. But now, they were something more. Diego crossed the room and took her hands in his, the same gentle touch she remembered from that night. "Rosa," he said quietly, "we promised each other that if we survived, we would build something beautiful together. I'm ready to keep that promise if you are." Rosa looked into his eyes and saw the future they had dreamed about during their darkest hour. A future filled with healing and hope, with children who would grow up knowing that love could triumph over fear, with a partnership built on trust and shared purpose. "Yes," she said simply, "I'm ready to." Around them, the clinic continued its daily work of healing, but for Rosa and Diego, this was the moment their real life together began. They had met in darkness and found light in each other. Now, they would spend their lives bringing that same light to others, proving every day that hope and love could grow from even the most desperate circumstances. The story that had begun with fear and bullets had become something else entirely. It had become a love story, a healing story, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful futures grow from the most broken beginnings.